Hi, this is Sarah Montrowl, working associate trainer for Art2Ride. Here we have a submission from Victoria and Vinny. I believe this is either their fifth or their sixth submission. And if you go back actually and look at the videos, it's quite nice to be able to see the progression here. You guys have done a wonderful job. It really is well worth it. I know you've been at it for about 3 years now, it looks like, and you've developed such a wonderful level of relaxation and harmony with your horse. It's really nice to watch. So without further ado, let's hop into your ride. The first thing I noticed here is that you are getting nice level of activation in moments here. The one thing I would love to see is actually that stretch, follow your rein down, and maybe not so much. He has a tendency a little bit when he gets farther down in the stretch to root a tiny bit. If you notice, he kind of pulls that last little bit of rein out of your hand. What I'd like to see him do is actually stretching down and deeper. So rather than having him just flattening out on you, you have moments right in these turns where you're actually getting him off your inside leg, where he starts to reach down, but then do you see how right there he likes to grab the rest of that rein? So right there is about where we want him, with just a nice soft contact in your hand. So I think I was watching one of the earlier videos, one of the critiques that Will did, and I think one of the things that you were working on the lunge line was actually keeping him out on the end of the lunge line and keeping those hips out on the circle. So the one thing I'll note that's sort of a theme for the ride is that he's doing a little bit of the same thing to you under saddle. I see that he's leaning a little bit on your inside leg, and you're not getting him very consistently in that outside rein. So he's sort of leaning on you and not bending through his back the way he should in those turns. So I did have a couple of thoughts on that, on ideas on what I might introduce into my training and when. I guess my first question is whether you do any work in hand with him. I think you would find adding a little work in hand work before you even get on will help you get that last little piece of the deep stretch that we're looking for. The two things it does for you as a rider, it's great because you can actually see your horse from the ground. You can visually see what an impulsed walk looks like. You can play about with the lengthening and shortening of his gaits from the ground, which is great. But I think the most important thing is it gives you as a rider another tool to explain sort of a complex concept to a horse, right? We're asking them to work from our inside leg to our outside rein contact. Now, sometimes that doesn't make sense for them under saddle. So when you stand on the ground and can show them with a whip to move their hips out to bend through their body, and then you can get on and carry your whip in the inside hand and replicate that, now you've created this great set of understanding between you and your horse, like creating a different language, right? So that's one thought. So I don't know if you're currently doing that, but that's definitely something I would recommend, because I think, as you see here, he's a little resistant in the trot here, and I feel that's largely because he wasn't quite completely connected at the walk. So that's definitely something to consider. The other thought is I might spend the first few circles here really working on first few minutes of the workout, working on a circle and really getting him off the inside leg to the outside rein, inside leg, outside rein. I think this will help him better understand what's expected of him once he gets to the trot. And so one more thing I was going to comment on, and I meant to say a little earlier, but I did notice, particularly here you can see it, how you're getting pitched forward and your legs kind of getting stuck out behind you. So a couple of thoughts of what could cause this. The first one I'm kind of leaning towards, because he's also telling me a little bit about this story, is that maybe your saddle is a little tight in front. So I was actually going to ask you if you'd had your saddle checked recently at all. It looks to me like it's quite low in front, and that's what's pitching you off balance that way. If your saddle's fitting right and he doesn't, and he's just generally like this. My feeling is that if it's not tack related, then it really does come down to the fact that you just don't have quite enough forward going on in this ride. Again, though, I can't tell you enough how great you've done in establishing such a nice rhythmic way of going, pleasant to watch. He's real enjoyable to watch. He's like a little metronome. So great work on that front. So I'll say that the quality of trot here is really not what I would want to keep going for too long. So when you feel like you haven't gotten them over their back, I do feel it's best to get back to the walk, reestablish the stretch, get them soft on the bridle, walking through from behind nicely over their back, then go ahead and come back to the trot, because I'd rather have a few good strides of trot and have him over his back the whole ride. And honestly, you may move a little slower than if you were able to keep him in a constant trot over his back the whole ride. But what you won't do is spend too much time of hollow work, which undoes your work that's right side round, if that makes sense. Right now, you've got this lovely trot going. Nice, nice, nice. I would say that if you can find a way to shortcut that initial period by maybe making it a little easier for him by doing walk and just a little trot, walk and a little trot, and just try it with your goal of just getting that stretch within a few strides, then I think that's worth trying. So I think when I was looking at an earlier video from Will, one of his critiques, you guys were working on lunging at the time, and I think one of the challenges with your guy here was keeping his hips to the outside and keeping him tracking on both ends of the horse on the same circle, right? I think maybe you're struggling a little bit with that same concept here under saddle. And what I mean by that is that he has a tendency to lean on your inside leg here and not step under deeper with that inside hind and then bend through his body. So at his level of development now, with the work he's done, and you guys seem like you've been quite consistent, which is great, I think you're really ready to ask a little more from him. So again here, when you start to feel that there is no change and he's not really working the way you're wanting him to work, it's okay to ask a bit more. It's okay to give him a tap behind your leg. It's okay to soften a little more on the bridle. So I think part of what's happening here is that when you're getting the impulsion that you want, you're getting that forward that you need to really be connected. Like you're starting to get there right here. You're sort of throwing the reins away. Like, do you see how there's a little inconsistency there? There's a lot of bagging of the rein. And so the challenge with that is that he then fills that lack of anything. Like, so he's looking for we're teaching them in the stretch that they should look for the contact. So when you're not keeping a consistent kind of handshake type contact with them as they come up and down in the different level of their gaits, they kind of feel all of a sudden like they've been dropped, right? And then you have all this energy that now has nowhere to go because you're creating all this impulsion, moving them forward, and then it kind of just flattens out and goes out the front. So I think what will really help move you guys forward to that next level of getting some really connected work is going to be incorporating something like work in hand, or continuing to work on your lateral work at the working walk before you even start doing the trotting. Again, really nice to watch you guys. Such a nice looking pair. I mean, such a pleasant, harmonious picture. It's really lovely. So you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Do you see how he sort of was counter-bent going to that turn? You lost the connection, and then he comes and offers you a stretch, but he's lost his impulsion again. So when he gets disconnected, it's a whole nother few seconds for him to get reconnected again once he gets himself disconnected. So the concept is ride every corner like it's your friend, because it is. remember to always ask, is he stepping off my inside leg, or is he leaning around it and am I having to pull him around my turns? So good, nice. You're starting to get a nice walk. I'd love to see even a little more swing here. I think a nice exercise for you to work on here would be if you want to do some straightaways. So I think you're doing a little shoulder 4 here. I will get back to that thought. Hold on a second. Nice, good. So just a little more impulsion, and I'd love to see it continue through this turn here. There you go. Good. Now that's more of the stride that we're looking for. Did you just see how that opened up right there? That nice, very specific step behind where it looks like they absolutely are sure where their hind end is landing. Nice. And I think a really good way to describe that, the type of forward we're looking for is I guess forward, obviously starting from behind, but catching that energy with really soft and consistent contact in the front, right? So one thing that helped me a lot was when I was working with a horse that was particularly wiggly and inconsistent was, Will just said, he's like, act like your hands are side reins. So, they have a little give in them, right? They've got those little rubber donuts in them. So they're soft, so they're not fixed, but they are not going to throw them away when they start moving forward. They stay connected to them. So I think maybe that's really going to help move your riding forward as well, is to just spend a few walk rides. Just really ask yourself every single stride, do I have the handshake contact with his mouth? Is he listening to me every stride with not only my legs, not only that, but is he actually soft in my hand? If I give a little squeeze or a little wringing of that rein, is he softening? Is he listening? Because that's the one thing I'll say is you get him to soften nicely in a couple of these working trots that are coming up, but I don't really ever see him quite soften completely in the walk. So I see him stretch out and down, but I don't see him stretch through as much. So perfect. Okay, so that's that's a good example to me of not having him out in front of your leg before the transition. So I try to make it a personal goal to feel like I can feel that next transition skin deep before I ask for it. So I want them to understand that we're about to go into that trot, right? So that means that you're going to get the most impulse trot possible without breaking to a trot, and then you ask for the trot transition. I think the other thing that'll really help you in those is keeping those shoulders back and coming back behind his movement, and give him a little tap into that transition. Let's have him really spring into that trot and stride out, because he's to a level of development that you can start asking for that from him. So again, really nice rhythm here. You're doing a great job. And so this is where I think I would really try to incorporate some circles or some serpentines, right? He's sort of having maybe too many straightaways, and as you see, there's no contact in the reins at the trot here. So I don't think he quite knows where to go, right? So I wouldn't worry about your hands being too busy or too rough with him, because you're a very nice soft rider. I think what you'll find is if you offer him a little more consistency with your contact in both this, in all levels of his head and neck set, including deep in the stretch. If he's got about a handshake weight on the rein with you, that's their happy place. They want to feel some level of connection to you. And when they start coming up, it's uncomfortable for them too. So I think you'll notice right there when you drop him, do you see how he pops right back up? right? He hollows out, he gets disconnected, he gets a little discombobulated. And then when you sort of settle your shoulders back and then you get that rhythm going again in the straightaway, he starts to sort of come back together. But it's very connected. If you look at the level of consistency with the rein, like right there, you're getting a nice trot. That's fantastic. Look how consistent your hands are. Look how consistent your shoulders are back. You're really with him in that. And he's carrying you. And that's the big distinction here, is that you are getting the level of impulsion required to get a nice consistent trot. So I think a valuable exercise for the two of you would actually be something that Will has had me do on many horses. And it's sort of a neat exercise because you kind of learn about how much more trot or how much more walk is in my horse. And that is just doing a slight lengthening in the walk and the trot on the long sides. Just seeing if you can get them to open their stride, not rush or change the rhythm, but just open it up. And that's a useful tool because then all of a sudden, I think as riders, we realize that maybe we've gotten lulled into a bit of a dance with our horses and we have not been progressing them like we should. We haven't been asking for more. We don't realize they're capable of much more. So now you're starting to get a little motor going. That's great. And again, I just like to see you come back a little, shoulders back. I'd like to see him out in front of you a bit more. I'd like to see that level of impulsion, maybe even a tiny bit more. And I think here I would, for instance, circle. Reinforce that off the inside leg. And as I mentioned before, I really think that work in hand is a really great addition to your workout as well. I think to be able to teach the horse what moving off the inside leg means from the ground can really help them better understand what you want under saddle. And I want to say too, I sometimes will incorporate it in the middle of my ride. If I'm having the hardest time getting them to stop leaning on my left leg, that's what I'll do sometimes. I'll get off, I'll work them in hand, hop back on a circle, check to make sure they understood the lesson and that I'm being consistent. And 9 times out of 10, it will fix that issue because it makes me aware of it too. It's, it's not just the horse that has that tendency. We have a tendency to hold them up too. So I think, so just coming back to just a few exercises that really could help you guys out, I think I'd like to see a lot more walk work, lateral work in the walk before you get to this trot. But this is lovely right here, like this. I would even ask for a tiny bit more. Now, here he's really nicely connected. That's one of the nicest trots you've had this ride. And this is when I would say, wow, he's really nice and, in the bridle. Let's ask for a little lengthening down the long side. Now, so make sure that when you have a nice trot like you just had, and you've been kind of struggling to get it during the ride, I would try to avoid cutting across the ring. I would try to stay on the rail and keep it, or put yourself on a circle. Really get a nice established trot so you kind of confirm it, and then try your diagonal, because the diagonal is extremely difficult for most horses to stay straight in, and unless they're perfectly connected in your aids, they're gonna do what he just did to you, which was a little bit of the wiggling through the diagonal. And I know all about that right now. I've got a baby I'm working with, so totally appreciate that feeling. But really, I can't stress enough just how pleasant this is. It's just nice and relaxed. In that first lunge video I saw, he was even a little bulky off the whip and everything, and you see none of that anymore. He looks just like a pleasant guy. So right there, I'd love to just see a little bit more, just a little more forward, because you've got such a nice spring going on. Now it's just a matter of getting that last little bit of power built in, and he really is ready to start doing that work. And, if the work in hand isn't in your repertoire or you're not comfortable with it, then walk work is fantastic. So if there are moments in the ride, at the trot, where you're just like, wow, we're just falling a little short here. He's not quite softening into the contact, or, you can't get him to stretch and he's just constantly above the bridle, then, bring it back to the walk and do some lateral work. Yep. Good correction there. Yep. Yeah, and I want to say, too, you've done a really nice job of keeping this ride flowing. I think this is a common mistake I see so many people make, is that, they try to break up the ride too much or get too creative with it. You're on the right track with this. The only thing I would add in is, and you don't need to even break a rhythm for it, just add in a 3-loop serpentine. It really gives you a good test to see if you're riding from your inside leg to your outside rein. It gives you a good idea about either precision, and it will really help you as you're starting to develop these working gaits, because you're going to really feel the difference when they're fully in the working gaits and ready to do it, because you'll be able to bring them up, and even in a 3-loop serpentine, they won't lose one bit of rhythm. They will just come up. One of my favorite exercises is to take, one loop in the stretch at the trot, bring them up into a working trot for the center loop, and then stretch them back out on the last loop. And really, just as a rider, focus, listen to that, feel that rhythm. Does it change? Doesn't it change? It's pretty fun to add to your exercise routine. I also like that you've got a pole out there, and I actually think this is a great idea for a horse that does not have a ton of flexion in their hocks. This guy actually when he gets going, he motors quite nicely behind it, and he gets some good cycling happening. But you'll notice once they walk and they just naturally have to lift their feet more, you'll get that feeling of impulsion that you're looking for. And when you can do it correctly and you maintain some contact over the pole, you'll start to really feel what that deep, soft stretch is. So not just coming down and then popping his nose out, but coming all the way through and keeping a bit of softness in his jaw and poll so that you still have contact there. Yeah, so here's a kind of a perfect opportunity to just, open up those hands and kind of test yourself. Just ask, do I have consistent contact? Or is every other stride, is there a bag in my rein, and is he kind of popping up and being inconsistent because I'm not very consistent with my contact? But I do want to just emphasize that it isn't a matter of fixing your rein width. It's a matter of adding more activity to your horse's work, so that you're actually, instead of shortening and fixing your reins, you're actually pushing the horse into your reins, if that makes sense. And when people say riding back to front, that's the true definition of it. It's not that you are trying to fix your bag and your rein by collecting them up. It's that you're trying to push the horse forward and lengthen his frame into the rein. Very nice, though. Such a nice, relaxed, lovely looking workout. So as you're heading towards the end of your ride here, I'll just leave you with my thoughts that the key takeaways from this ride is that you are doing a lot of the right things here. You really are progressing nicely. First of all, definitely check your saddle fit. I would hate to see you and Vinny struggling against poor saddle fit if it's just dropped in front, and that's creating some of these problems and may even be causing some of his lack of willingness to move a little more forward, and will also sometimes create that leaning problem that I've seen. So I think it's well worth looking at that. But I think the biggest takeaway here is that you've got such a nice, relaxed horse with a great foundation. I think it's time to ask him for more activity. I think especially now that he's got a nice working gait going, even really nice working trot. Try it out in the walk first. Try your working walk and try adding that impulsion into the stretch. So start your working walk out, do your workout the normal way you do. I'd say try to send him forward. Send him forward more than you've sent him before. If you need to do it by lengthening on the long sides first, try that. But I think it would be worth it for you to start really trying to add kind of more of a working marching walk into your routine at a working gait level, so you can shorten up your reins a little, bring him into a working walk, really feel that feeling, settle him in the bridle, and then let him find his own balance that way. But overall, wonderful work. I think you guys are doing a great job. Keep it up.